Today we are going to do a full flip through of my Hobonichi weeks, which I use as a health and wellness tracker. This is one of my favorite books out of my entire planning and journal system. I am in this book every day except when I'm on vacation, and it holds so much information. It's also a place that has allowed me to do deeper reflection into my overall well-being, and it's enabled me to be a better advocate for my health to myself and also to other professionals that I might be working with. So today I'm just going to flip through it and share the evolution of it, and then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about what I'm going to be bringing into 2025. And probably in a separate video, I'll do a flip through of my 2025 setup, but it's going to be very similar to what you see today. Before we get started, grab yourself a tea or a coffee or your favorite beverage of choice, a snack, and a journal or planner to keep you company while we hang out and chat about my health and wellness planner. My snack of choice today are these butter cookies. I have the tin. I'm really trying to embrace the cozy vibes as we head into the winter, and a tin of these butter cookies always helps. And my drink of choice is some hot water. All right, let's get into it. I haven't really done anything with this page. The first page that I've been using is this yearly overview index page. I've been using this to track my steps, and I've also noted down the high, the low of the month, the average, and then the change over last year. Next year, I think I'm going to do something similar and use this for steps, but I'm also going to use a little bit of color coding to mark down the days that I go for a run. So I think that would be interesting information. So I'm going to skip the monthly pages because I didn't want to censor anything out, but I'll explain how I've been using it. So I've been using the monthlies as a place to track my social interactions. So part of my self-care plan is to stay connected with my support network and ensure that I spend time with the people that matter to me. Even though that sounds obvious, one of my big patterns when I'm not doing so well mentally is I withdraw and I isolate from my friends and family. And so I've really found it helpful to have an overview where I can see how often I'm actually interacting with others apart from my partner who I live with. And so all I do here is I just write down the name of the person that I spend time with, and sometimes I note down what we do. So it's very plain, very minimally decorated. Some of the months I don't even decorate, but I really enjoy this because I like to see a month at a glance of what I'm doing. And if I notice that the calendar gets really blank, that is a signal to me that something's going on. And usually that kind of reminds me to start reaching out to others and putting in more effort into making plans with others. So this was technically the first year that I had a health and wellness tracker in this way. And so I moved into this book last November. This year, I'm going to finish my health and wellness tracker in December of this year, and then I'm going to move into my next one in January. So I will have some blank pages at the front, which doesn't really bother me. So this was the first iteration of how I set up my health planner, and I still have my sticky notes from when I did a prioritization exercise. I'm not going to do that again for this year because I don't think it's necessary to reinvent the wheel. I will leave the video that I made last year in the description in case you want to see how I came up with the things that I wanted to track. My process was I took little sticky notes and I wrote down everything that I thought I could possibly want to track in my health and wellness, and I really based it on my self-care plan and all the things that I knew I wanted to keep up with in order to practice self-care on a regular basis. I had all of my sticky notes of everything I could possibly think of, and then I did a bit of a sorting exercise where I prioritized the things that I felt would be the easiest to track and also would make the most impact for me. I pretty much stuck to this throughout the whole year, and I made a few changes along the way, which you'll see. And then for the monthly, to be honest, I did not do any of this actually, really. Yeah, I mainly ended up using the monthly mostly for social and relationships. So I didn't even track skin breakouts really because I ended up finding it more useful to do this in the weeklies. And I track my cycle in an app. I know I could do it in here, but I've been using an app for so long that I at this point I just prefer to track it in an app. Okay, so it's cool to see this. It hasn't changed that much, but that was my process into initially figuring out what I wanted to track. So you can see here on the left page, I have weather on, I separated this into 3 columns initially, and I had weather here where I drew in the weather and I noted down the high and the average. For the mood, I used a star system to rate my mood from 1 to 5, and then I would sometimes add a little description. I was a little bit all over the place in the beginning, but eventually I narrowed it down to wanting to note down what I was feeling. Here I had feeling in the 3rd column, and I eventually changed this to extra note space. And then on the right hand side, I have my habit tracker at the top, and that really hasn't changed. And then I tracked sleep and mood visually. So I had sleep on less than 4 hours all the way up to more than 10 hours. And I ended up changing this once I realized that it's very rare that I get more than 8 hours of sleep, which is not great to realize about yourself, but that was a pattern that I started to notice over time. And then for mood, I used a 5-point system to track my mood, which corresponded with the stars. So there was some repetition here, which I do fix in 2025. And then I just left space here for notes because I always like to add notes for context. So I kept up with this layout for quite some time. Okay, so I kept up with it until the first week of December, and that's when I kept the 3 columns, but I did weather here, I did mood and feelings, and then I added notes, and then pretty much the same thing on this side. So I did that for quite some time. And here I just played with how I wanted to separate the columns. And eventually I decided I preferred having no lines at all. And for the most part, I don't really do any decor because I want to make sure I have enough space to track everything that I need. But sometimes when I have a bit of extra time or sometimes I go back onto these pages and I'll add some decor. So when I was filling this out, this was blank, and then I think a few months later I decided to just pop on some stickers here and there. So you'll see that it's very minimally decorated, and it's mostly because it's meant to be more of a place for me to kind of record what's going on. So I really didn't change this layout much for the rest of the year. The only thing that I tweaked was I started to add a few more habits and just some decor when I felt like it. And I guess with my notes, that also was something that evolved where it was initially almost like a running log of things I felt like would have an impact on my health and wellness. So I would include things like people I saw because that was like a social thing, or I would include, spending time with my family. But I felt like a lot of this information was actually getting captured in other books and it wasn't really necessary. So over time, I evolved this notes page into being strictly about like symptoms. I've been struggling all year long with eczema flare ups, and this has turned into a place where I log how my skin's doing. And as you'll see later in the year, I've gotten a little more intentional about that. But for most of this year, I was logging a lot of that information in the notes. So I continued on like this for quite some time. This layout works really well for me. I found this really easy to fill out. And my routine is that as soon as the day starts, I open up this book and I fill out things like how long I slept, and I look at the weather from the previous day and I fill it out. I usually take stock of my mood. So these ratings are when I'm like at the beginning of the day when I'm actually filling out this book, because I do recognize that your mood can change throughout the day. And then I keep this on my desk, and as I check off some of my habits, I will update this. So sometimes I will open this up, I will fill out my sleep, my mood, maybe make a couple notes, think about how I'm feeling, and then maybe I'll do some journaling, and then I'll just come in and mark it off as something that I have done for that day. And after a while, I started also adding in the pen I was using and the ink, because I often go back and I wonder what I was using. So I tried to get in the habit of doing that so that I always have a record. And sometimes I add sticky notes as well to try to remind myself of notable events. So, for example, I was in the habit of drinking 2 cups of coffee a day, and I've since cut down to 1 coffee a day. So, more often than not, I only have 1 cup of coffee in the morning because I've been struggling with my sleep and I'm trying to cut down on my caffeine. So this was something where I wanted to note down when I really started to make that a habit. And then I often use this as well for if I'm starting to feel off, then I will flip through this book to look for patterns. So if I notice that I'm not feeling great today, then I'll flip back and look at trends in my mood or my sleep to try to help me understand what could be contributing to that decline in energy or mood, or maybe increase in anxiety. So we continue on in this year. I pretty much have not changed anything. And that was really nice, having that predictability of, setting this up really didn't take that long at all. The longest, most tedious part was using the stencil to stencil out the 5 stars. So as much as I liked being able to kind of color in the stars at the beginning of the day, I think I'm going to move away from that in 2025. So you can tell as time goes on, I start adding more things into my habits or things that I want to track. So many notes about my skin, which was a really big eye-opener for me, and it's one of the main changes I'm making for 2025, which is being even more intentional about tracking how my skin is doing, because 2024 was very much a reactive year, and I'm really hoping in 2025 it'll be a much more proactive year in terms of trying to get my skin under control and figure out a way to manage my breakouts more effectively. So we continue on. We get into when we headed out to Japan for our trip. So a lot of this is stuff that I backfilled. When I went on my Japan trip, I did not bring this book with me. I tracked all of this information in my traveler's notebook in a passport-sized insert. And when I got home, I did go ahead and backfill this because honestly, I just wanted to have all that information in one book. And it was only this week, a little bit of this week, and then this week. So it wasn't really that much to backlog. And now I'm glad to have all of that information in one book. Okay, so it was around November when I decided to change up my layout. So this is the biggest change, and it looks really complicated and it looks really full. But I think after 10 to 12 months of getting into a habit of filling out this was really just like adding to it, and it felt really manageable because I already knew that I could manage filling out this much information. And so it does look like a lot more, but it's not necessarily stuff that I wasn't tracking in other places. I've just consolidated a few things into this layout. So this is the layout pretty much that I will be bringing into 2025, at least to start. Over on the left side, I have broken this out into 2 columns. One is like a single column, and it's the weather because I find it really helpful to have the weather. I think it adds a lot of context into what's going on with my skin, that kind of thing. So we're not changing this. And then over here, I used to track my mood and feelings and have notes, but now I'm using this space to track my meals. And that's because I suspect that at some point I might have to do some allergy testing, or maybe do some kind of deeper investigation into the relationship between what I'm eating and how I'm feeling, especially when it comes to my skin. And so to me, I think it is useful to have my meals in the same place that I'm tracking my health. Previously, I was tracking my meals in my everyday planner, which maybe didn't seem to make sense, but it was something else that I always had open on my desk. And so I just thought it would make more sense to track that in something that I was already accessing on a regular basis. I also tried tracking my meals in my meal planner, which seemed like it made sense, but my meal planner lives in the kitchen and it's very much a shared book, whereas what I eat is very personal to me. Obviously, my partner and I usually eat the same dinner, but we differ on our breakfast and lunch, and sometimes my snacks as well. So I felt like it was worth it to track my meals in here, so I made a space here for that. And then because I like having notes related to each day, I have a column here on the right-hand page, and this is where I'm mainly tracking my sleep these days, but it's also a place where I can track how I'm feeling and maybe even any small events that I think may be relevant or I feel like noting down. Mostly it's just been comments about my sleep and my skin. And then over here, this does look different. It's not that different to what I had before. It just has more things that I'm tracking. So everything up here is pretty much what I had here. So that's about the same. And then here, I'm tracking a few more things that I think are worth paying attention to. So I'm tracking my water now because I recognized that I don't drink enough water. I used to, and then I guess I fell out of the habit. So this is a commitment on my part to try to put more effort into ensuring that I drink enough water every day. I'm also tracking how much caffeine, so this could be tea or coffee, and I'm trying to limit it to one coffee, maybe two. So this is just a way for me to keep track. I'm also tracking when I'm consuming alcohol. I hardly drink anymore, but occasionally if I do, it could be interesting to see if there's any impact on my skin or anything like that. Then I have mood. This has been changing a little bit. I tried my little face 5-point system, but I actually think I'm going to move into a 10-point system just so that I can keep it consistent with some of these other items. I'm tracking my anxiety levels, and this is from 1 to 10. I'm also tracking my energy levels, and I'm tracking my hours of sleep and whether or not I've had a sleep interruption. So for mood, anxiety, energy, these are things that I want to be monitoring because I do struggle with anxiety and I also have ADHD, and these things are often hand in hand. So what I'm really looking for is an overall trend. If things are starting to get really bad, I want to know for how long and I want to know to what degree. And that's the kind of information that I would want to know myself, but also the kind of information that I would want to share with my doctor or any other health professional that I'm working with. So these are really common symptoms of someone who struggles with anxiety, which is me. So these are relevant for me to track. But I think if you struggle with any type of chronic illness or mental health issue, I think it's really helpful to track your symptoms and just keep an eye on them. So these can be changed up depending on what is important for you. And then down here is another new section, and this is very specific to me. So this is what I would consider like chronic illness symptom tracking. For me, my biggest issue is my skin, and I have been struggling with flare-ups all year long. And while I've been kind of documenting them, I think for now I really want to be even more intentional. And so I'm tracking flare-ups. I just have a little key here where a big colored dot is needs attention or it's sort of at its worst. And then this is kind of like the in-between, and then this is when things are settled down. So for me, tracking it in this way, I can see when things are really bad versus when they're better. And I like that I can kind of track them alongside all of these other items. And then in this section here, I'm using it for more notes and reflections. So a lot of these are covered up because they're very personal, but it's usually things like things I'm observing in my physical health or my mental health. Setting this up does take a little bit longer than setting this up, but I'm not finding it, for now anyway, I'm not finding it to be too much, but I guess we'll give it time in 2025 and we can always adjust and tweak and do whatever. So I'm feeling really good about this layout. It's very full. There's hardly any room or any decorating, but I find like this is very comprehensive, and what I really like about it is now I can start to answer questions like, well, how long has your flare-up lasted for? Or how has your mood been overall in the last few weeks? Or how many hours on average have you slept in the last few weeks? And what are your energy levels like when you're in a flare-up versus when you're not? So all of these things are questions that I want to know, especially because they give me historical context. So if I go through something in the future and I'm trying to figure out, how long, like what can I expect for myself to recover, I have my own historical data to look back on. And that can be really powerful when you are in the middle of a really difficult moment, to have an anchor point to remind yourself that you once went through something similar and you got through it. And here's how long it took. So that's the kind of information that I want to have on hand the next time I'm going through a really similar struggle. So we continue on with this layout. And that takes us to the end of this week that I'm filming. And then because this information is so dense, I also wanted to have a bit of a high level overview of what was going on. So I've created some dashboards, some data dashboards that will center around mood, anxiety, energy, sleep, and skin primarily. That's a new thing that I'm going to be introducing in 2025. And the point of that dashboard will be get a high level overview of what's going on and make it easier for me to communicate certain things to my dermatologist or my doctor in the future when I am meeting with them and I want to give them a summary of how I've been doing. So this has been a bit of a work in progress, but I think I've come up with something that I'm kind of excited about. It's definitely a bit of a manual process, trying to fit in a year's worth into like one sort of dashboard that will hopefully actually be meaningful, but I will show you that later on. Moving ahead to the notes pages. So here I have some of my trackers. I track TV shows that I've watched. I track movies that mostly Mike and I watch together. Books that I've been reading, and I noticed that I tend to read books in spurts and when I'm on vacation. So this was empty for the majority of the year until I went away on vacation and then pulled out my e-reader, and now we have books. Also, I track my date log, which I need to update. I originally got this idea from Lindsay Scribbles, and I thought it was such a great idea. I just have the date, the description of the date, my rating of it, and then maybe some notes. I do a very similar thing with a friend log. I don't rate it. Mainly all I do is the date, the name of the person I spent time with, and then some notes on what we did. And these are mainly in-person hangouts. So originally I was thinking anytime I interacted with a friend, but instead it's mostly anytime I have spent in-person time. I find that spending time in person is something that I need to remind myself to do more of. Okay, and then here I have my monthly recaps, and most of this is censored out, so I'm just gonna go through this really quickly, but basically I just do, for every month, I will divide this out into the right side, which I fill out first, and that is where I log everything that happened that felt noteworthy. So I put a plus sign if it's a positive thing, I put a minus sign if it's a negative thing. And then on this left side of the page in the top half, I choose 5 highlights. Obviously these tend to be the more positive things. From here, I choose 5 highlights that I want to really call out. And then down here, I note down everyone that I connected with. So I say connected because it could be someone I saw in person or someone I spent time with in a virtual hangout. And I tend to do these month by month, so I don't do these ahead of time because I typically write this out with whatever fountain pen I'm using for that month. So you can see here I did one for every month. Oh, this was a random yoga log when I thought I was gonna really get into yoga, and unfortunately you can see I did not do that much yoga this year, so maybe a goal for next year. But yeah, so I just continued on each month. And yeah, sorry, I just censored everything out because I don't really want to share these things. This one I don't mind sharing because this is mostly about our Japan trip. And I haven't done November yet, but I will do that after this video. And I've left a blank page for December, and then I left a blank page in case I wanted to do some kind of full year recap. This is kind of a sneak peek of my data dashboard. Honestly, I think for next year it's going to look like this. I want this to be kind of like a year at a glance of a focus area. So this data dashboard is a year at a glance that focuses on my skin issues. And I went ahead and put this together because I have a dermatologist appointment coming up and I want to be able to relay certain information to my doctor, and I don't want to be flipping through my book. So this is not accurate because I didn't start logging things with intention until November. So this is a bit of a guess. But basically here I have the all the months across here at the top, and then as columns, and then as rows I have up to 31 days for 31 days of the month. And anytime there is something noteworthy, like something that needs attention, or something that maybe needs monitoring or maintaining, so that's kind of the level of severity. The idea is I mark them down here so that I can have a yearly glance where I can say, how many days did I experience X, and how often? And then the squares represent events that are noteworthy. So those correspond to the dates over here. And so you can see March 10th, I have a note here about a certain type of cream that I started to try and what it was called. And the reason why I have this here is because I want to be able to say to my dermatologist, these are all the things that I've tried so far, and here's what worked and what didn't work. This section is meant to answer the question of how many times did I experience the symptom. And then here is meant to answer what have I tried, what would I want to share with my doctor. And then down here is meant to be kind of like a monthly average of the entire year. So I realized that if I wanted to show patterns for the entire year, it wouldn't make sense in this format. I tried to figure out like what information would be useful because I know to some degree I want to have a yearly overview, but I want it to be something that I can actually display on in my Hobonichi weeks. So this is a bit of an experiment. I will see how things go. But the idea here is that it's going to be a mix of a bar chart and some line charts. And so far I've got 3 things that I will be likely tracking. So remember when I said I changed my mood and my mood to a 10-point scale? That's because I track my anxiety on a 10-point scale. Now I'll have mood on a 10-point scale, and then sleep is kind of on a 10-point scale. So basically, I don't have enough data to actually fill this out, but the idea is that each month is going to be an average of these things, and then I will use these different keys to denote the different thing that I'm trying to compare. I don't know how it's going to go, but I think it'll still be interesting to at least see a monthly average of how my anxiety and my mood and my sleep are interacting. Obviously, I'm not going to see the real nuances that I would be able to see if I did a monthly view of these things, but I think I'm more interested in a yearly overview, and I'm not so interested in seeing the monthly overview, at least for now. And if I really want to have that information on a monthly view, I can always use the monthly calendar. There's a space at the bottom. My thought is if I really want to use, like create some kind of graph that shows the entire month, I have the option to use this bottom space in the monthly calendar or this sidebar instead of dedicating an entire spread to that. So personally, I think the yearly overview is something that is going to be more useful for me, especially when I'm trying to look at trends out the entire year. So we'll see how that goes. My plan for now is to do one for skin issues, and then I'll swap out this section for different areas. So for example, I think I'll do another one for anxiety, So we will look at anxiety over here and get a kind of detailed view of anxiety. And then we'll have a comparison here of mood and sleep and maybe energy levels or maybe skin issues. So there'll always be a way to kind of compare these things, but then also get a detailed view, and then I'll be able to have notable events. I'm not going to do too many of these dashboards because there will be some repetition, but I'm going to prioritize things that I think I would want to keep an eye on, or what I think my doctor or a health professional would want to know. And then the only other thing that I've been using these notes pages are, and I won't show you, I start from the back and then work my way forward if I have more. But I just have notes from certain doctor's appointments and things that I want to have here, like if I'm doing any kind of investigation, or I just have some notes on longer term things that I want to remember, then I add them in the back. And then over here, I haven't filled this out yet. I'm not sure what to do with this page yet, but I'm thinking it'll be some kind of end of the year activity where maybe I just use these icons and pick my favorite movie, book, music, something. Meal. Haven't done anything with this My 100, so maybe another review thing that I do at the end of the year. And then I did do an interview with myself. And then here I was tracking letters sent, but I actually forgot to continue filling this out, so it's actually not accurate. I'm thinking in the new year, instead of using this for letters sent, I might even use this because I think it would be very ambitious to send 100 letters or postcards to friends and family. So maybe I'll actually do this and then I can actually track who I sent a letter to. Maybe. That's just a thought. All right, well, that concludes my final flip through of my 2024 health and wellness tracker. Let me know if you have any questions about anything that you saw here. I kept it pretty consistent throughout the year, and I only really started to make tweaks near the end when I was thinking about what I might want to do differently for 2025. I'm feeling really excited to continue doing this because it has really added in a new layer of self-awareness and reflection for myself. And I love how compact it is. I mean, this is fluffy because I've added so many sticky notes and papers to censor information. But at the end of the year, I'm actually going to remove all of those things because I won't be sharing this online anymore. And it's easier for me to be able to see that information. So I think this is actually going to be a lot like slimmer after I remove all of the, the extra bits and pieces. And I think this is just going to be such a great archive to flip through. And I'm really excited to move into my new health and wellness tracker, which I have already started to make notes on. So it's not going to be the most interesting setups. That's why I've been hesitant on whether I want to film a setup or not, because I don't really do a lot of decoration, and it's really going to be very similar to what I did last year or this year. So let me know if you'd be interested in seeing something like that. I know there's a lot of really great setup videos already out there, and I just needed time to figure out what I wanted to change, and I feel very good about where I'm going with next year. So anyway, if you're still here, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I appreciate all of you so much. If you are setting up a health and wellness tracker for next year, I would love to know what format will you be doing it in, and what are some of the questions that you want your health and wellness tracker to answer for you. All right, well, I hope you're doing well and slowing down as we get to the end of 2024, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Bye!